WWE Money in the Bank takes place on Saturday in Los Angeles. 4 matches currently announced on the card. One, to me, feels a little predictable. The other 3, I'm going to be completely honest with you, I am not exactly sure where they're headed with these other 3 matches. We're going to talk all about them here in this video. Let's start with the one that I think is probably more predictable, and that is the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. Lyra Valkyria defends against Becky Lynch. And we know this is sort of that last chance sort of match where everything's on the line for Becky. If she loses, she can't challenge for that title again while Lyra is the champ. And when you think about the way this feud has gone, it's kind of surprised us maybe a little bit in terms of the twists and turns. This all started at WrestleMania 41, where you had Becky coming back to win the tag team championships with Lyra. She turns on her, on the Raw after WrestleMania. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez win the tag team championships back. And then this thing has escalated in terms of the personal nature from there. And I think it's even more personal at Money in the Bank on Saturday, because I think Becky Lynch is going to beat Lyra Valkyria and win the Women's Intercontinental Championship, because that to me seems like the most obvious path when it comes to getting you where you need to go with both of these women, which for me, you give Becky kind of a win that maybe she needs right now, although she's the man. She doesn't ever really actually need a win. She's Becky Lynch, right? But in this instance, I think when you think about the way this feud has gone, Lyra, in my mind, and maybe some other people's mind, got a bit of a surprising victory the last time out between these two at Backlash. And so now I think with the last chance stipulation and all that, sure, you could have Lyra beat her again, but I think Becky winning and maybe eventually getting to that Lyra kind of perspective where maybe she is kind of someone who could turn heel at some point in the future. She's getting the what chance and that kind of stuff right now. Maybe that kind of plays into something down the road. But for now, Becky winning, and can this feud continue? I mean, it may be able to, possibly for another match, but I think Becky winning and kind of getting to a little bit of a fresher approach between these two, or Becky and another challenger, or kind of seeing where Lyra goes without the title, that may open up a little bit more, suspense versus if Lyra just wins again, well, what do you do? I mean, you just have Becky just go off on her again like she has before. Those are possibilities. But I'm going to pick Becky to win this one. I just think it makes the most sense for the storyline. All right, now to the first of the Money in the Bank ladder matches. We start with the women's match. It's going to be Rhea Ripley, Alexa Bliss, Naomi, Giulia, Roxanne Perez, and Stephanie Vaquer. And this should be, I think, maybe the better of the 2 matches. I am really looking forward to this one. And not to knock how good the one is going to be on the mid side, because you do have a lot of very talented, stars in that one. But I think this one maybe could be better just from an unpredictability standpoint. I think this one may feel a little bit more unpredictable, because I honestly believe you could make a strong argument for any of these women in the match to win it. Now, we know that's not always the case, and we know there are a couple of these you can probably roll off right off the bat. And I think it starts with Rhea Ripley, because if we're going to do this the way where we kind of eliminate one person and then get to the winner, Rhea Ripley does not need the Women's Money in the Bank briefcase. We know that, and I think from that perspective, it's going to be about seeing where Rhea goes from here in terms of maybe getting back in the title picture. And to me, yes, Rhea has been front and center. She's been a prominent figure in this women's division for years now. There are other ways to get her back to a championship other than just having her win the Money in the Bank. It's the first time she's been in this match, and they're pushing that. And so you can kind of use that against her actually a little bit if you wanted to kind of say that lack of experience may come back to cost her in this one, or maybe someone else comes back to cost her in this one as well. So I'm going to remove Rhea from the conversation. Giulia, we know, was just called up, and it seems like she has her sights set on Zelina Vega in the United States Championship. So for that reason, I think I'm going to take Giulia out of the running as well, because I do think it probably makes a lot of sense for her to go straight into that thing with Zelina Vega now, and, more so expecting that whoever wins this briefcase is going to cash in on the world champion, unless they want Giulia to eventually maybe win both titles, the United States Championship and the other, either world or women's title in WWE. Then I think you're certainly looking at, the possibility that she probably gets taken out of the running here, because it does seem like she has a program set up with Zelina coming up here soon. All right, now I think, again, this is where things get interesting, because I really look at the other 4 and I'm like, well, I could really make a strong argument and feel like I can justify any of these 4 choices with Naomi. And that's not to say I couldn't justify maybe the choices with the other 2, but with Naomi, with Alexa Bliss, Roxanne Perez, and Stephanie Vaquer. And I think this is where, to me, it really becomes challenging. If Roxanne were to get the women's Money in the Bank briefcase, then that obviously adds a pretty interesting dynamic with her and Liv Morgan, given everything going on with Judgment Day right now. And you have Roxanne possibly in a position where, let's say, Liv eventually wins back one of those championships at the top. Well, all right, then maybe Roxanne could capitalize on Liv, right? And remember, we don't have to have a cash in immediately. This thing could go for a long time. Sometimes they do them quicker than others. But I think with that, Roxanne winning could be sort of a fascinating setup to where she has the briefcase, whereas Liv didn't even qualify, right? And that's because Stephanie Vaquer qualified. And I mentioned to you guys in the video we did on Tuesday, it's very clear that WWE and the state of the women's division right now is about as good as it's been in a while. And because you saw everything they've done to promote Vaquer as someone who is just a huge potential top star of the company type level. I mean, she was a, double champion in NXT. What a first year she's had in WWE. And so I think when you look at it from that standpoint, there would be no surprise at all if they were to put that briefcase on her and say, all right, we are strapping the rocket to her and she is going all the way to the top. But she can do that without the briefcase, right? She doesn't really need the briefcase as a device to be able to get her to a title match. And honestly, it would maybe somewhat feel a little odd having the briefcase on her because she is kind of someone who's just like, hey, I'm just going to come out and I'm going to kick your ass. And I don't need the briefcase to do it. I don't need to, cash in maybe in the traditional way or anything like that. And so this is also a match where it's multi-women, so you don't have to beat her in this match necessarily, right? It's a ladder match, so she can lose here, and I think you sort of get away with the idea that it doesn't hurt her, even because she's probably going to shine in this match. So I'm going to take Stephanie Vaquer out of that mix as well, because I think she's kind of in a position where, she's going to be protected no matter what, and I don't think losing this match hurts her at all. And so that leaves the other two with Alexa Bliss and Naomi. And I think Alexa, someone we were waiting for her to come back on WWE television. And, they've still got this stuff going with the Wyatt Six, and how is she going to be connected maybe with that at some point here, in the future. We're still waiting to see how that plays out. And so I don't think it's, anything to where we can kind of discount Alexa winning this, because she has kind of had the interactions with Tiffany Stratton. She's had kind of the backstage stuff going with Charlotte Flair. That's leading somewhere. We know Charlotte wants to get back in the title picture, but she's not going to be able to do it now through Money in the Bank. So that could be something where if you have it on Alexa, and again, if you tie in the Wyatt Six stuff and all that, it becomes a little bit more compelling. But for me, my winner is going to be Naomi. And I have mentioned this before in previous videos. I think Naomi is the one who gets the most out of this in terms of the story. And I think she, given this character she's rolling with, even the one where she went into Bianca Belair's childhood home to look at the photo albums while her parents weren't there. What a line that was. I just think that is the type of person who needs a Money in the Bank briefcase. Because if they're willing to walk into their former friend's home with no one home, they break and enter into the friend's home and start going through old photos. That's the kind of person who needs the briefcase, because that is someone who will do anything it takes to maybe get what they want. And it's also someone who, clearly with the way they're portraying Naomi, she can go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly in terms of the emotion and the aggression that she shows. And so having that person like her with Money in the Bank, and then knowing that you have these things you can tie in with Bianca and Jade in the future, I think it's a lot more interesting, because that could even be something where Naomi does cash in, she wins the title, then maybe you have Jade or Bianca somehow chasing her, and you tie in all three of those. Do we get the eventual Bianca heel turn? All this kind of stuff. I just think there's a lot more fascinating directions you can go with if Naomi wins this thing. And so therefore, I'm going to pick Naomi to win the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. I think she, in my opinion, is probably the best choice for where they seem to be headed. But like I said, I don't really think you can go wrong here in this women's match. I think there's a lot of compelling reasons for the others as well, especially maybe those three call-ups in Roxanne, Perez, Julia, and Stephanie Vaquer. I think you could go ahead and say, all right, we're going to give them the briefcase, and we are telling you that we just called them up, and they're going to become champion. Because when we give them this briefcase, the women's, I think, 8 for 8 in terms of cash-ins? There's never been a failed cash-in on the women's side. which could also play into Naomi winning if she becomes the first person to fail to cash in, let's say, due to Jade or due to Bianca. Then you talk about the aggression and the emotion heating up in that feud. I think it's a lot more interesting than maybe the other possibilities here. So give me Naomi in the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. All right, now we get to the men's Money in the Bank ladder match, which, like I said with the women's, I could make strong arguments, but I think for this one, I can maybe feel a little bit better about canceling out a few people, just kind of knowing where we're headed, probably with their stories as well. And, of course, this match includes Seth Rollins, Solo Sikoa, LA Knight, Penta, Andrade, and El Grande Americano. And for me, I think there's two people right off the bat that I think you're probably going to look at and say, I don't like their chances necessarily. And that is Penta and Andrade. Because I think with Penta, as we said, I think you're clearly heading towards an eventual reunion with Rey Fenix in probably a tag team setting, even though Penta's proven that he can kind of do this on his own. I think we're probably headed towards that at some point soon. If that happens, you can kind of use, once again, maybe it's some interference here, some kind of numbers thing, where Penta's going to shine in this match, whether he wins or not. It's a ladder match with Penta, and so I think he's going to be fine here no matter how this plays out. And I don't think he probably wins it unless, again, they want to just say, hey, we're moving Penta from this level, and we're going to take him up to here. I don't think Penta's your winner. Andrade, as I said, was kind of a surprise winner, I thought, of the qualifying match. I thought Carmelo Hayes would maybe get the spot, but it is Andrade. And, again, if you want to go with the theory that, hey, one way to really heat someone up, which I don't think Andrade had been there, one way to heat him up is to have him win this briefcase. And all of a sudden, you are making it very clear that, okay, hey, this guy is going to be now, elevated into a role he's not been elevated in before on the main roster. And so that's a way to do it if Triple H wanted to do that. But it seems far-fetched to me in terms of Andrade being the winner here, but another person who should shine in this match and be just fine. But as for the win, I just don't know if that is the expectation. All right, the other four, that's where, again, we kind of take it down to the final four here, just like we did for the women's side. And I think for me, Solo Sikoa is someone that is in this match, right? And everybody's kind of pointed out the win-loss record for Solo over the past 6 months or whatever it's been. It's not been great for Solo. So maybe you need a little bit of something to get some momentum back leading into what we know is going to be an eventual showdown with Jacob Fatu based on how all this is going to play out. But for me, because Solo did play a role, as we said, in Jacob Fatu not making it to this Money in the Bank ladder match based on the fact that Solo was somewhat involved, in that triple threat match that allowed Andrade to qualify, then I think you can kind of do the reverse here where maybe somehow Jacob cost Solo, something like that. I don't know if it's going to be that blatant, but, I think you want to have Jacob Fatu somewhere on this show, which the only place you can put him, at least right now, unless they decide to add, Jacob Fatu versus Damian Priest or something, it's probably out there with Solo. So could you do something like that? If Solo won this Money in the Bank thing, I just don't think that you're selling that to your audience based on everything that happened. I told you guys I'm probably higher on Solo than most whenever they actually do the stuff that I think Solo's good at, and that's kind of letting the personality come out and all this other stuff, but I don't think it's being Mr. Money in the Bank based on kind of where we were this time last year with Solo and maybe where we are right now. So don't think Solo needs it, so I'm going to take Solo out of the running. And then it comes down to what I think are the big three here, and that is Rollins, LA Knight, and yes, Mr. Americano. LA Knight to me is an interesting one because, I think if we're looking at this and tying all three of these guys together, for me, LA Knight is probably the guy based on if you think that Seth Rollins winning is just simply too obvious, then to me, the biggest benefactor of that would be LA Knight. He would be your winner in that scenario because it does seem so obvious that Seth Rollins is probably the choice here, right? It seems like he is the person who is set up the best to be able to be in a position to use this device, the Money in the Bank briefcase, to add more of that heightened drama and the suspense every single time, which could be as soon as, and we're going to tie this in a second, could be as soon as the main event of this show with a tag team match that involves two different champions. But you also have the match coming up 2 days later on Raw between Jey Uso and Gunther. That could be where Seth Rollins could potentially tease that cash in or try to cash in or maybe successfully cash in. And so if you're going to say that Rollins is too obvious, then LA Knight, to me, is probably the next best choice, because finally maybe he gets that opportunity, and, it doesn't have to be right now, because right now it'd be kind of odd, you would think, to put LA Knight into one of those pictures of winning the World Championship. But the guy still gets such a great response. He still gets such great fan reaction, and you could keep building that up a bit. But to me, I think it's clearly something where El Grande Americano has become the wild card here. Because I know it seems far-fetched to think that he could win this match, but when I really think about it, and I think about the possibilities with WWE and what they could do with this story of having El Grande Americano win the Money in the Bank briefcase, Chad Gable is wrestling Vikingo on the Worlds Collide show for the AAA title, and somehow do you have some kind of universe where Americano is the Money in the Bank holder, Chad Gable may be possibly the champion of AAA, or maybe he loses, and then it's Grande Americano cashing in on Vikingo at some point. And then somehow you get this universe where you've kind of got a potential face-off between Americano and Chad Gable, and then Gable proves that he is not Americano because he has to wrestle him. Like, you see what I'm saying here? Like, it's so convoluted, but it's so wild that I could actually see them leaning into this and saying how absurd it could be that Americano has it and maybe eventually tries to cash in. You've got Gable and all this other stuff. They're doing the back and forth. They clearly like this. They are clearly all in on this idea that Americano is a character they're going to keep running with. So I am not going to discount the idea that he may actually be the surprise winner here. And I don't think we should. We should not discount that he may win this thing to set up that really wild scenario of somehow having him interact with Gable, and the Money in the Bank briefcase is there, the AAA title's in place, or simply, the eventual unmasking and all this other stuff and how that plays into it. But I'm going to go back to what I, again, think is the best option here, and I think it's Seth Rollins. It is obvious. It seems so obvious. And it goes back to what I talked about in the Roman Reigns video I did not long ago. You have two options here with Roman Reigns returning. Either he comes back to screw Seth Rollins out of winning Money in the Bank, or he comes back to screw Seth Rollins out of successfully cashing in Money in the Bank. I still think the more impactful way is to have him screw Seth Rollins out of cashing in, because it would be a failed cash-in. But you could also bring Reigns back here to screw Seth Rollins out of it. LA Knight wins. El Grande Americano wins. Somehow someone else benefits from it. I'm a little bit more of the side that I think there is a possibility that Reigns could come back here. But because I think this may not be the main event of this show, I don't know if that's where you want Roman Reigns coming back necessarily. So I think Rollins gives us the most dramatic way forward if he wins this thing. And so I'm going to pick Seth Rollins. It seems too obvious, and that's my concern here, is that it seems too obvious. But I'm going to pick Seth Rollins. But again, don't be surprised. I think if they were to pull some trickery here with Americano and Chad Gable, or maybe LA Knight finally gets his run. I think it's one of those three that win this match. All right, then that gets us to the tag team match, which it seems like is going to be the main event of this show. And I just mentioned the Money in the Bank potential cash-in. This does set up a pretty compelling situation where if they are putting this tag team match in the main event of John Cena and Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso, if you have Rollins also with that Money in the Bank briefcase, then I think it sets up drama, not just for what's to come on Raw, 2 nights later, but it sets up the drama for this main event, because you could absolutely see a scenario where Seth Rollins could try to cash in on Jey or potentially John Cena. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but it's just something we have to think about going into the main event. And I think if it was LA Knight, if it was El Grande Americano, these are things that would kind of maybe, all right, I don't see that happening. But it's not, you can't rule it out just based on the fact that someone would have the briefcase at that point if this is the main event, right? So to me, this is very easy for me. And I don't mean in terms of the prediction. Actually, I think this may be the toughest match to predict when you look at it. If you look at the betting odds out there too, this is the toughest match to predict. I've seen straight up even odds for both sides here. I've also seen it lean in the way a little bit of the heels. But there's two ways you can do this, and it seems pretty obvious. Cody Rhodes can pin John Cena to set up their one-on-one match for the rematch, whether that's, which I think would probably be at SummerSlam. You still have Night of Champions, you have Saturday night's main event, all that coming up. Cody pins Cena here, sets up your rematch, simple. Or you could have a situation where the heels, John Cena and Logan Paul, via either some outside interference, and my goodness, it could be from Travis Scott because they're in Los Angeles, or you could have Gunther play a role in this, knowing that he gets Jay 2 nights later, and maybe Gunther plays a role in that. You kind of soften up Jay even more heading into that rematch between those two on Raw. So that's it. It's one of those two, I think, that plays out here. Cody pins Cena to set up the rematch, or it's Gunther or someone else gets involved, and the focus is really on Jay being the one that takes the fall here. Because I don't think you just want to straight up pin Cody, right, on his return match after a month off and people may be feeling a little bit down on Cody. I don't think you want to do that. And so it's really just which way do you make the decision to go here. And, when I think about it, I'm like, think about the reaction, WrestleMania 41 Night 2. It's John Cena standing tall, Travis Scott, not the greatest reaction there. John Cena standing tall after heel shenanigans at Backlash. Saturday night's main event, John Cena standing tall over R-Truth. And, just keep kind of going down the line here, and you're thinking, man, it's kind of a, the heels just kind of getting the best of everything here, aren't they? And so the tension between John Cena and Logan Paul here could cost them, and maybe that's kind of the third option here, is that something happens between those two, and that's how Cody and Jay win. I kind of think Cody needs to get a win back here, and I think he needs to pin Cena to set up, the way this thing's going to go. I like that option better, of having Cody pin John Cena, and maybe it comes via the issues between Cena and Logan Paul. Maybe we're quickly getting to that, as I said. Maybe that's a Night of Champions thing. Maybe it's Saturday night's main event, however you want to do it. But I like that better than the option of Cena and Paul winning here, even though I understand that you could do that and simply use it to play into the idea that Jay is in big trouble leading into that match against Gunther on Raw, and that may be where they're headed. But I'm going to pick Cody and Jay here because I just think that they, in this scenario, probably need a little bit more. And I don't know that the WWE Universe can take a John Cena and Logan Paul team standing tall at the end of Money in the Bank, and without knowing where they're headed for Night of Champions or Saturday night's main event, we kind of feel like we know where we're headed for SummerSlam. But you still got to get to those shows first. And so there's, either way, I think works out for them, even though I think Cody and Jay winning may be the one I support a little bit more to give Cody some of that momentum back if he were to pin John Cena in this. Or maybe he could pin Logan Paul, and then you kind of protect Cena a little bit. And, again, it still comes back to Cena and Paul having some disagreements here. So give me Cody and Jay in the main events. All right, your turn. Give me your predictions. Drop them in the comments below. Give me your picks for all 4 matches, guys. What do you think is going to happen? And I'll appreciate you watching. And let me know your predictions for WWE Money in the Bank.